Landscape designing is an art and arrangements of plants and non-plant components on a piece of land in an aesthetically pleasing manner. So when we're doing a landscape, we must carry some thoughts in our minds, like some rules and regulations. So in this session, we are discussing the principles and elements of landscape design. So there are basically six principles of landscape design. So those are unity, variety, balance, sequence, simplicity, and proportions. So, in upcoming slides, we are discussing each of the principles individually. So, the first principle, unity. The unity creates in landscape from colors, curvy lines, straight lines, construction lines of materials, the texture. So, these can be defined the unity of a landscape. These components can be defined unity of the landscape. As we mentioned in the picture, so we have the creation of unity here, like we have some civil structures in a white color and some green carpets. So throughout the landscape we can observe some color contrast and some color combinations, so it can be made to a unity. So here we have a symbol of unity at the center of garden as a focal point, so that must be a sculpture. So here also we have a sculpture in a water body, that is the center part of the core of the garden area. Here also we have a terrace system of stepping, that is also a focal point which create a unity area. So unity is the quality of oneness. Unity attracts and holds attentions. Unity organizes view into orderly groups with emphasis. So unity can draw attention to or away from something. So we can cover the awkwardness by providing a unity in the garden area. So the unity overriding principle, unity tying the landscape together, use similar backgrounds and foregrounds to make a unique garden. The second element we must keep in mind in a landscape is variety. So the variety adds species and interest in a landscape from the helps of lines, forms, textures, and colors. So the variety is diversity and contrast in form, texture, and colors, preventing monotony. So if we are planting the same kind of flowers, the same kind of foliages in single color, it will be in a monotonic look. So we have to break the monotony by using planting of variety of plants like the shrubs, herbs, and also some colored foliages and different colored flowers. So the texture of plants or the different colors of plant can break the monotony. So it can be lead to the variety. So it has oftentimes been said that the variety is a price of life, spice of life. So it is required in order to achieve a significant interest in landscape. For variety, filling with other landscape materials. Too much variety creates confusion, but the lack of variety is boring. Without variety in both the use of hard and soft landscape material, this can be lead to unforgettable results. So, the third principle we must keep in mind when we're doing a landscape, it should be the balance. So the balance in the case of plant height, the color, or the textures we have to maintain in a landscape. The formal static classical designs the same thing on the each side of the central axis. So if we have a central axis, we have to provide the same things on both sides or the either side of the garden area to keep the same balance. That must be in color, that must be in plant texture, that may be in the selection of plants or in the design. So if we provide a similar design in a formal landscape, it must be on the other side. If it is in a informal garden area, that must be in asymmetrical balance. So the balance are two kinds. The first one is symmetrical. It is applicable only in the formal kind of gardens like Mughal and the Persian garden and the Italian gardens. So the another one is the asymmetrical garden, the asymmetrical balance. So asymmetrical balance is only applicable in the informal style of gardening. So we can provide some equal balanced plant species. Like if you're partitioning the garden into two halves, then the left side will be provided with some tall trees and tall shrubs. The right side must be provided with some the huge area grassing or the huge area flower buds, the huge area flower borders must be there to balance the hugeness of both sides. So To create balance, features with a large size, dense forms, bright colors, and core structures appear heavier and should be used sparingly, while small size, sparse forms with gray or subdued colors and fine textures appear lighter and should be used in a greater amounts to indicate the movement of ice. The balance should be indicate the movement of ice. In landscape design, is just as the word implies a sense of equality. The plant height, color, and texture may be varied from one area to the next, but each area should stay consistent with its own theme. So we have two types of balance. The first one is symmetrical balance, the next one is asymmetrical balance. When we take the case of the symmetrical balance, the symmetrical balance is where there are more or less equally spaced matching elements of in gardens designed like mirror image. So the formal balance repeats the same left and right, giving stability and dignity. Is it need high maintenance to keep both sides similar. So we have to maintain the shrubs, we have to maintain the hedging plants, we have to maintain the flower border, we have to maintain the ground cover, equally important. So symmetrical balance can be boring sometimes. So we have to go for some an extra an additional plant species or an additional plant component, additional garden component to break the boring this monotonous. So distribution of visual weight equally happened in the symmetrical balance. So eye feels the sense of unity or the eye movement indicator. When it comes to the asymmetrical kind of balance, asymmetrical balance is where the balance is not depend upon the shape of your garden. It can be, but generally it's not. Actually, it is depend on the indicates movement achieved by using similar ideas but different things on either side. So informal balance differs from left to right, giving curiosity, movement, and feels alive because we can't predict what will be in the either side. So in the formal garden, when we when we visit one side of the garden, we can assume that the either side will be exactly same what happened here, exactly same will be there. So in the asymmetrical balance and in the informal garden areas, we cannot assume what will be the either side. In design is just as the word implies a sense of equality, but in only visual massive balance from the central axis. Asymmetrical balances cannot be boring. Another principle of gardening is sequence. So sequencing can be achieved through the graduation in size and types of the plants shrubs be used. The effective use of sequence is oftentimes employed to create visual movement in landscape. It is an important consideration to take the development of overall planting pattern. So the sequence could be an orderly natural combination of plant and materials of a landscaping. It may be plants, it may be non-plant component like a rock or a garden stepping stones or the pathway stones or the sequential elements like the shrubbery, topiaries, or what are the things we used in a common manner that always used for the sequencing. So sequence can be help the eye movement from one area to another orderly progression. When we when we visit a garden, if we observe a sequence, we must look to the other end of the sequence. So it can grab the attraction. It can grab the eyesight of a visitor. So the sequencing are here to the near to far, then sequence of shrubs, plants, and trees. So one of the most common problem in landscape is trying to do too much. When we fixed a design, when we completed a garden designing, or when we executed a design, don't go for too much planting after that, or don't go for further planting for the purchase of planting. So it will break the entire design, it will break the entire define structures of the garden, the parallel structures of the garden. So simplicity is essential for landscape design. The plants and the other materials of designing in landscape components into a simple unified scheme is always an existing challenges. So simplicity shown in the images from the repetition of landscape elements. So we have the first picture we have only three components: one hardscape component, and the grass component, and the tree component. These three components are repeatedly planted to show the simplicity. So here we don't have an eye irritating issue when we look into the garden area. So when we look into the garden of the top right corner, so those are filled with the topiaries, and we have arranged topiaries in a circular manner. So we are only used the plants like the green colored boxwoods and the white colored flowering plants to give a contrast, green and white contrast. So the green color is a cool color, and the white neutral colors are the gray. White gray colors are the neutral one, so it has a good contrast. The proportion. The proportion simply refers to the size of elements in relation to each other, that is scale. The scale is also termed as proportion because the scaling of different objects with the different sizes is termed as proportions. So the relative proportion is the size of an object in relation to the other object. The important absolute scale in design is the human scale. A feeling of balance can also be achieved by having equal proportions of open space and planted. So when we discuss about the Mughal garden or the Persian garden, we have the equal proportion in both sides of the garden area. So the scaling is an important uh, principle in the formal garden types. So proportion is the sense of requirement that size of the individual components or groups of components in a landscape fit into the whole landscape area. So the proportion is the relationship with width or length of an area to the relationship to the part of an organization. The special consideration and study should be given to proper plant selection to avoid using plants that are out of a proportion. The scale usually bears references of size of a thing or object that appears to have a pleasing relationship to other things or the design as a whole. So the scaling must be uh, take care of in the designing of a garden. So it can be all together. It can make a beautiful garden. So after the main principles of gardening, we have some elements of landscape design. Those are color, form, line of sight, scale or balance, texture. These are the five elements of landscape design we must take consider in designing period of landscape. So, color. The color theory is often used in landscape design by dividing the color spectrum into four categories. So, as I mentioned before, there are cool colors and warm colors, and in between we have neutral colors. So, in the cool color session, we have the primary color like blue, then the secondary color like green, and also some tertiary colors of blues and green shades. So in the warm color scale, we have the primary color of red and yellow, and the shades of these primary colors, like secondary and tertiary colors on the right side of the color wheel. So those are the warm colors. So when we go for a garden, we have to mix these colors to get a beautiful contrast. By mixing the warm and cool colors, we get the contrast colors. So the primary colors are reds, yellows, and blues. Secondary colors are greens, violets, or purples and oranges. So tertiary colors are a mixture of the primary and secondary categories. So the neutral one is white, grays, and silvers. When we when we adopt some vibrant colors in our garden, we have to provide some neutral colors as white or gray and silver colors to match the contrast combinations. So it will be soothing for the eyes too when we visit a garden. Form. In landscape design terminology, form is the shape of a plant. So there are some different shapes we must have provided for the plants, that is upright, oval, columnar, spreading, broad spreading, weaving. So tall plants create a vertical loop drawing the eye upward. Low spreading plants draw the eye to the horizon. use individual specimen plants to break monotony and create interest. A mixture of variety of forms becomes confusing, so we must avoid that element. So we can tame the plants in a form like in upright form. The trees and shrubs are mostly in upright form, so the hedged or trimmed topiaries are in oval or columnar or spreading like plants. So we can get all the shapes by trimming and pruning of the shrubby or the herbaceous plants. So we have broad spreading forms of grasses and ground covers and creepers and climbers. So the weeping plants like the weeping trees of Callistemon lanceolatus, those are the bottle brush and the brownia. So the simsiba tree, those are the weeping trees, and also the polyalthia longifolia, which is called as that. Uh, Foliage weeping tree. So these all plants have different forms according to the designer structure, according to the style of garden, whether it is formal or informal. You can fix the plants accordingly, according to the shape. So the line of sight. The line of sight is another element in a garden. So the line of sight is a viewer's eye movement or uh, flow being influenced by the arrangements of plants and their borders. Eye movement is unconsciously affected by the way the plant groupings fit or flow together both on the horizontal or vertical planes. So hedges or rows of plants direct the attention to a focal point or specific area. So we can provide a sequential, orderly arrangements of non-plant components or the paver blocks or the hedging plants, leading to a focal area, leading to a main path area of a garden premise. So it can be helpful as a line of sight element. Scale and balance. As we discussed in the previous slide of symmetry, the scale must be provided. The scale and balance must be provided in a garden. So the scaling should be start from the center of garden area or the viewer point of the garden area. So the size of the plant must be smaller in the foreground area. When we go to the mid-ground area, it can be up to 60 centimeter or 1 meter height, and when we go towards the periphery or the back end of the garden area or the background of the garden area, the tree components can be planted as a tall, heighted plant components. So the scale and balance is an important factor in a landscaped area. The visual relationship of the landscape components related to size. So equal size on the both sides of the landscape is the balance. So the symmetrical, the repeating of the elements on either side of an axis. It is an imaginary central line, so which is called as a symmetrical garden area. Even though in the Mughal gardens and Italian gardens, there is a central water stream to separate the symmetrical line. So, in asymmetrical scale and balance, equal size or weight on both sides of the axis without repeating the specific elements can be provided to keep the balance. Then texture is more important in landscape design. So texture is a touch or visual surface quality of an object or plant. The texture of a plant's foliage or bloom can be viewed as coarse, medium, or fine. When we touch and feel the plant's leaves, we can feel like some plant have the rough surface leaves and some plant have the glabrous surface leaves and some plants are the most soft leaves. So the grass plants have the soft leaves and some shrubby plants have the woody or roughy surface, and some herbaceous plants have the glabrous leaves. So these plants can be chosen accordingly, choose wisely when we plant for the landscape. Then water is a major component. We have already discussed in previous lessons. So water has a capacity to grab attention of the visitors, and the moving water can always provide some soothing sounds to the garden area. So it will be in a peaceful atmosphere when we provide a water body or a waterfall or a water stream inside the garden. or or also we can provide some addition to the water component, like some submersible plant and some floating plants, fishes and ducks too. Rock. Rock could be boulders, cobbles, stone, and gravels as paving, or building walls as ground covers and surfacing. Can be used in its natural state or as cut stone, salt stone, or polished stone. So these are all the stone components, we can use in the garden area. So we have mentioned some pictures like flagstones, gravels in several colors, pebbles. So the granite pavers. Also, these are all stone components are the major part of a garden area. So rock has an important role in garden component.